So I just want to thank Linda Watanabe McFerrin of Left Coast Writers, Kunal Mukherjee, Nancy Reuscher, Larry Brown, Barb Evenson, Susan Dre, and David Siegel, all who gave me some essential early encouragement. And of course, the person who really made the book possible, who is my departed husband, Dr. Morris Taylor. Okay, so The Rites of Passage. It's a novel about a young man coming out in a disarmingly hostile middle-class neighborhood. The book starts with my fascination for identity and how we can both miraculously remake ourselves, and at the same time we have this unique core of integrity that is our true selves, and we can only betray that at our own peril. And where is that line? What is the difference between that? And how do you find out what that is, what your sense of identity is? So I attempt to look at that through many, many different facets in the lives of our hero, Jamie Goldberg. And to do that, I've written the book on many different layers. And I wanted to tell you a little bit about these layers by reading portions of it. The original, my book launch, I went through all the different layers. This one, in subsequent talks, I will be talking about specific layers. And because of the institute we're in, this one's going to center on sexuality. But first, why write a book on layers at all? Isn't it easier just to tell the frickin' story? Why do this? And the reason why is because if you write a book that's just on one level, meaning it's only just a story, and we know books like that, things like 50 Shades of Grey, which is barely on that level, and it's like shooting an arrow. You're either going to reach that one audience that understands that one layer or not. If it's multiple layers, there are many different approaches, and they are independent as well as interdependent, meaning you could just take from the book whatever you want. At the same time, if you read the book again, you'll often read it from a new perspective, and that's why some books are worth reading multiple times, and other books like, okay, one time was maybe good enough, and some not even making it through one. So to give you some example of some ideas of how I have implemented these layers, I'm actually going to go over as much as I have time for. So the layer one is, it's really just a coming of age story, and a good story with some very interesting characters. And I guess one of the things I want to read right away is one of those interesting characters. This is a extract of the book. Jamie, for reasons I don't want to spoil, suddenly finds himself needing a job, and he goes to an office, and this is the job interview. I sat in a small room. Past the solid white plastic door, the windowless room was barely big enough for the two swivel chairs on either side of a plain gray metal desk with an adding machine and a stack of papers. I was feeling a little uneasy, unsure if I was the Goldberg that Mr. Kaufman was expecting, since the receptionist didn't even bother to ask my name. I couldn't possibly be the only Goldberg in Oak Park, which was a predominantly Jewish neighborhood. Eventually, in walked a large man holding a sheet of paper, my application. He closed the door after him. He was a tall man with a prominent mustache. His head was a large reddish egg draped with sides of dark gray hair. Based on the rest of his body, he would have been skinny if not for the balloon-shaped protrusion from his belly. "Hi, I'm Shell," he said, offering his hand. After he sadistically shook my hand, Shell edged his way into the chair behind the desk. His belly hung over the top. "Hello, I'm James Goldberg." "James?" Jim." "Right, Jimmy. Have a seat. I heard from Marjorie you want to work at the bagel factory." "Well, if you have an opening." "Well, as a matter of fact, I don't. But maybe for the right person we'd make one. Capiche?" Unsure, I nodded my head anyway. "I have your application here. You're a good student." He glanced at the paper. "Studying political science." "It runs in the family. I come from a politically active family." I tried to cover up being in the theater, thinking it was too fey for bagel work. "I see you certainly volunteered in a lot of political campaigns. Have you ever baked bagels before?" No. "No? Bakery experience?" "No." How about food service?" No. Okay, how about any job at all? I didn't dare say anything. I was seeing this job slip through my hands. Let me see those hands. I was embarrassed enough this interview was not going my way, but now we had to get personal. I showed him my hands. Have you worked a day in your life? I had a newspaper route once. A newspaper route? And I helped out as a stock boy in my uncle's shoe store when I was in high school. And why exactly should I hire you? I thought of my empty job experience, but then also my nearly empty bank account. I need a job, Mr. Kaufman. You need a job? And call me Shell. I don't like that Mr. Crap. You need a job. I do. I need a job badly. I'm a quick learner and I'll do good work. Oh, you will? I'll do whatever needs to get done. You will. I don't know how else to say it. I need this job. Well, what do you need it for? Well, I have to support myself through college and I don't know who else to turn to. I need the work. I learned to be a good worker. My father's a construction electrician in the IBEW. Really? My brother Sam's a member of that union too. Maybe they know each other. It doesn't matter. The guy's a bum anyway. You want to bake bagels? Yes, absolutely. Well, it isn't fun, and those pretty hands of yours will get calloused. I can learn fast. I relaxed. I felt I had some chance. I'm going to spend all this time teaching you to make bagels. How do I know you won't just turn around and get a new job at like a bank or some sissy sit-down work? I bristled at the sissy comment, but outwardly trudged on in pursuit of the job. I hate banks. You do? Well, don't hate banks. It's a moronic thing to do. But you're in good company. Shell glanced upwards at the ceiling. Well, what kind of commitment can I make to you? Well, it'd be nice if you could hang around 6 months. But I can't stop you from... You'll be out of here the first chance, I know. The pay's lousy. Sid up here's a cheapskate. I love the guy, but he's cheap. Gives us Jews a bad name. Capiche? Capisco. I felt it was beginning to go my way. Huh? Oh, I understand. Well, I don't know. I got your application. I'll see what I can do for you, young man. I can't make any promises. He then stared at me long and hard. Why do you have to support yourself all of a sudden? My parents stopped supporting me. What? You've been a moron to them or something? Oh, I suppose so. Well, I don't like morons. Well, but maybe you're okay. Do you think I can get a job? Hard to say. You have no experience. It would be a huge risk. But it isn't every day a stray walks up on your doorstep. You need a chance. Maybe I got one for you. I'll talk to Sid and let you know. So, on that very surface level, it's just a good Midwestern story with some good, hearty Midwestern characters with New York accents. Another layer I would like to just touch on really briefly is the political and social commentary layer, because there's also a political element to this as well. I want to quote the reviewer Constance Zaber, who in the Forward's review said the novel is unflinching in condemning its overt bigots and well-meaning liberals whose tolerance is only extended as far as their own comfort will allow. Jamie's mother, a white Jewish woman and a crusader for the civil rights movement, is at once lauded for her politics and taken to task for placing her son in physical and emotional harm. Such complexities and their willingness to understand the world and its uncomfortable truths are the hallmark of Taylor's writing. So let's briefly meet this champion of civil rights. And this is going to be the first chapter, so supposedly it needs no introduction. Detroit, Michigan, spring 1970. I'm sorry, Mrs. Goldberg, it's against the school rules. Mrs. Bradford's temples were pulsating. I, Jamie Goldberg, was her least favorite student. I was as annoying as a precocious 10-year-old student could be. Too smart for my own good, but not smart enough to make life easy for myself. She regularly humiliated me in front of my classmates, leaving me to wonder if I would ever belong to anywhere. Mrs. Bradford enjoyed thwarting me with brute strength, if not mental superiority, but my mother was a force she was unprepared for. You can't let me take my own son out of school, scolded my mother. Her small 5'1" frame, bobbing red hair, and outrageous blood-red designer coat with the black tentacle fringe made her look more menacing than her size. The tall, gray-haired Mrs. Bradford towered over my parent. "He's not sick. He's perfectly well. There is no reason to take him out of school, Mrs. Goldberg. Stopping a war isn't a reason to take my son out of school." "No, it isn't." "You won't let me take my son out of school?" "No." I saw my mother relax. I couldn't suppress a smile because I knew Mrs. Bradford had lost. "Okay then, just try and stop me." With that, my mother, Mrs. Ruth Esther Goldberg, demanding wife, defender of the people of Detroit, and the mother of the school's most unpopular student, walked over to my chair, picked me up by the arm. I almost stumbled out of my chair. "Go, Mrs. G!" cried Brian Germain, one of the school's first black students, courtesy of my mother's political machinations. "We're going," she said, and she hauled me out of class. Amid hoots from the other kids, Mrs. Bradford ran to the school intercom, yelling something I could not hear because within an instant I was out of the room. Mom whisked me into the car where my older brother Stephen was already sitting. "What Neanderthal schmucks," she fumed. Off she drove us downtown. The ride was jerky, but that was normal for us. Mom's foot didn't quite reach the gas pedal, so she resorted to giving it a good kick in order to maintain speed. In the back, I was breathless from the tension in the school. I was thankful that the fight was over and settled in my mother's favor, my terror of later consequences notwithstanding. I was certain Mrs. Bradford would take revenge on me in front of my class in some dark and horrific way, while my mother, who was trying to save the world, was more willing to sacrifice her son, just as Abraham willingly offered up Isaac. Whether God would stop her at the last minute, I was unsure. My mom was driving Steve and me to the anti-war demonstration, and it wasn't the first time her political activities had gotten me in trouble with the authorities and my fellow peers. When I was 7 years old, she had maneuvered to desegregate the local school district. She succeeded in getting only one African-American child, the aforementioned Brian Germain, into our school. Mom's accomplishment turned all my friends against me. Not at first, but as kids compared notes with their parents, they ended up hating my guts, calling me nigger lover, and other names my mother would never allow me to repeat, let alone complain about. The only real close friend I had from after that episode was this very same Brian Germain, the single African-American whose family had the courage to choose the all-white school. Unfortunately, that is for me, not the United States, around my 8th birthday, my mother tried again. Any remaining sympathizers disappeared when she and the local civic organization successfully sued the school for discrimination. The presiding judge ordered the school board of the neighboring African-American township to resign. Then the judge fused the two school districts into one, and instantly my school went from 75% Jewish and 24% Catholic to 51% African-American and 49% beleaguered Caucasian. This latter group couldn't get out of town fast enough, except my family. We were in it for the duration. The school became an integrated, segregated school. The African Americans stayed among themselves and took my only friend Brian with them. This left me with no one, and neither side thanked me for my association with the ruining of both their schools. So we see there's also the political bent. However, when you're looking at politics, and I think you're looking at other traits of people that are things that are malleable. People can change their political views over time. They can change their perspectives and attitudes. When it comes to sexuality, though, this is one of the things that I think really hits on our innate sexuality, on our innate personality, sorry. That really, you really can't lie to who you are inside as far as your own sexual orientation. The fact that sexual orientation is a moving target, we can get into later. But for here, I just want to say that you can see that by testing what Jamie's sexuality or what his approach to it is, we can also kind of gauge where he is in his development. So let's kind of look at what his introduction as a young child into what sexuality was. So I'm going to read. Here we go. This is a chapter right after Richard Nixon resigns. At the same time, I know many people don't remember this, but when Nixon resigned, the Supreme Court also overturned cross-district busing. And whereas Jamie was deliriously happy that Nixon resigned, his mother, oops, Freudian slip, was quite disappointed because it meant he was stuck in Detroit schools. He wasn't going to be able to be bused to a different school. But so my mother was, Ruth Goldberg was encouraging Jamie to get dressed, to go into his room and get dressed and go to this school event so that he can make friends. And he didn't understand why he was being pushed into his room. Because, for me personally, I didn't see the need to change schools at all. With the white kids mostly gone, things eased up on the bullying front. I much preferred being a honky to a nigger lover. Moreover, any racism I encountered because of my skin color, I wrote off as affirmative action like reparations. It also helped that our newer neighbors were friendlier and their lighter-skinned counterparts. Anyway, you have to work to excuse me. Anyway, you have to work to do before you go out tonight, she smiled. Sorry, Mom? I couldn't imagine what she meant. I want you to clean your room before you even think of leaving the house. She said. Her forced smile was quite disturbing. All right, but I wasn't going anywhere tonight. Yes, you are. Have you forgotten, Jamie? Forgotten what? As soon as she asked, I remembered the stupid neighborhood party. Tonight you're definitely going to that barbecue. The barbecue could be attended by a who's who of the cliquish high school crowd, and I would be as welcomed as wet toast. Having failed to integrate our high school, Mom was now trying an equally daunting task of integrating me. For my part, I assumed that I would be lonely no matter where I went. I felt different not just because of my skin color, but because my secrets set me apart and surrounded me in perpetual weirdness. Just how weird I was about to discover. Why would I go there, Mom? I asked. Maybe to meet someone, Jamie? You have friends, but you never go out. You don't ask anyone to come over. How can you expect to find a girl for the prom if you're always in front of the tube? This was pure denial on the part of my mother. She still imagined I could meet a nice Jewish girl, not yet banished to the suburbs. Well, you have to start somewhere. Look, you're a grown kid. You look great. You do. There's no reason why girls aren't fighting over you. Really? Maybe to kick me. Hardy har har. You're not that unpopular. She was right. My mother's local politics also had a moderating effect on the new student body. My former Jewish neighbors threatened that I would get beaten up and stabbed by blacks. The reality is I was allowed to go about my business, albeit alone. The shirt she picked out was a fancy designer shirt I dreaded wearing. They'll all laugh at me. They will not. It's the latest fashion. No one wears fringes on their shirts, Mom. It's in. It's all in. It's in all the style magazines. Anyone who laughs is square anyway. You don't know what's in because you need to get out more. Go clean your room, too, before you go to the barbecue. Sure, Mom. Go clean your room. What is this new fascination with cleaning my room anyway? I asked. It's a pigsty. Go, and then go tonight. They're expecting you. I sauntered reluctantly over to my room. Every step was heavily laden with teenage passive aggression. I had no intention of going out anytime soon. I opened the door. True, the room was a mess, but that did not explain my mother's eagerness for me to return to it. In true Ruth Goldberg fashion, she had placed the book on my recently made bed. At first, I thought it would usher in a new chapter in my life, a new intimacy with my parents. I thought the book would prove my savior. But the book, a book meant to save me from destruction, was no savior at all. No one talked to me about it. There was no introduction, no discussion. It just laid there. The title of the book was titillating enough. Everything you always wanted to know about sex, but were afraid to ask. The author was a Dr. Rubin. Was my mother daring me to have sex with a girl at the barbecue? Maybe she had assumed I already had. My parents and I had never really discussed the typical birds and bees topic, and I assumed this was going to be the substitute. I looked immediately for pictures. Skimming the pages, I was disappointed. There were none, not even so much as a scientific drawing or two. Then, one word in the book caught my eye, masturbation. I'd never heard of it, and I wondered what it was. The section on masturbation alone was a godsend. It allayed one of my worst fears. Quote, Masturbation is the most common in early puberty when sexual objects are unattainable and social prohibitions are enforced. Young boys usually masturbate by grasping their erect penis gently and with the hand and stroking it repeatedly from tip to base. All this time I'd been doing it too fast. Who knew? And all kids did this. Even after sex ed, I had no idea children or anyone did this, let alone that they had a name for it. And I was convinced I was truly sick and perverted because of it. After reading the whole chapter on the topic, I felt a great relief. I fancied that Brian may have done this, possibly at the same time that I did, giving us some sort of mystical spiritual connection. My gratitude to the book and my parents was extreme, but the feeling did not last. I read on. Then I came to a chapter that described a group of perverts, disgusting individuals whose behavior was truly abominable. As my one client says, whenever I feel like sex, I drive down to the bowling alley. I walk into men's room, I find an empty cubicle, go in, take down my pants, and sit on the toilet. Then I wait. It never takes long. My jaw dropped. Pretty soon, another guy sits down. I watch his feet. If it's a gay guy, he'll slide his foot over and nudge mine. He moves over to my cubicle and sucks my penis. That's how it ends. Sometimes I suck his penis, but usually I just go home. No feelings, no sentiment, no nothing. As I read, I became more alarmed and frightened. It wasn't masturbation I should have been worried about. It was the thoughts during masturbation. Specifically, the thoughts of my mystical and spiritual friend, Brian. Of course, I had no fantasies of meeting Brian in a bowling alley. Well, not yet anyway. Just to be sure, for safety's sake, I would probably be better off not thinking about Brian. And that should be simple. He really doesn't like me, and nor was I likely to be friends with him again. And besides, I had amassed about a half a dozen of my brother's Playboy magazines by then. Done. That was settled. It was ridiculous to think that I would be one of those homosexuals. I read the rest of the chapter with contempt, ignoring for a moment the more horrifying physical reaction I had, which was an erection. The next chapter was even more distressing. Most homosexual encounters are more impersonal. A homosexual walks into the washroom, spots another homosexual, and drops to his knees, and it's all over. No names, no faces, no emotions. There are dozens of variations, but they all have the same thing in common. The primary interest is in the penis, not the person. I'd never done any of those things in my life, yet strangely, I felt accused. Kneeling on the floor in front of a quavering, oversized penis seemed a very real and threatening image to me. Some nightmare relived. Surely I was mistaken that this could ever have happened to me. And then I read on for some reassurance, and instead of making me feel better, it made me feel worse. Those who combine homosexuality with sadistic and masochistic aberrations are among the cruelest people on earth. In ancient times, they found employment as professional torturers and executioners. More recently, they filled the ranks of Hitler's Gestapo and the SS. Playing the Hitler and Nazi card succeeded in dissolving my erection at once, yet at the same time I knew exactly the people Dr. Rubin was describing. I racked my brain for how and why I felt this, and then the book even went on. They specialize in luring other homosexuals into their apartment, trapping them and torturing them. Terror, intimidation, gratification with the victim's pleading usually satisfies the S&M. Unfortunately, the outcome is unpredictable. Occasionally the torturer gets carried away. The evening escalates and ends in mutilation, castration, and sadly death. Sadly, it's all part of the homosexual game.
Wow.
So if you can imagine, so this is in 1970s Detroit, there's no real counterbalancing comment, there's no counterbalancing examples. So when he finally realizes, much against his will, several years later, that he really is gay, or he really has these feelings of being attracted to men, he comes up with the idea that it's probably better to be dead. So he tries to commit suicide once, he's thwarted. He tries to commit suicide again and is thwarted again, and then he comes up with an idea for a third attempt. And this, he thinks, is a brilliant plan because he learned it from the very book where he learned that he probably should commit suicide. He makes a plan to meet someone. I started to feel uneasy and regarded the entire arrangement. Why did I arrange this meeting in public where I was known or at least recognized? I wanted to meet at my house. My parents were away in New Orleans for a political convention. At home, the deed or deeds. I had no idea what it would take. It could be done quickly. Looking at the empty space across from me, I fidgeted in my seat. I began to feel a kind of anticipatory embarrassment. I should never have invited someone I didn't know to a place that knew me. I shifted in my chair. I was afraid this guy would actually hate me, but actually that's what I was counting on. Dark panic seized me. Oh my gosh. Get up and leave, I told myself. Don't do this. I fantasized the horrible way Jake might kill me. A vivid picture filled my imagination. I saw him hacking my head off right there in the delicatessen, blood pouring out from the booth as my dismembered skull rolled on the floor like a lopsided bowling ball, the waiter kicking it down the aisle in disgust. I got up to leave. Too late. Jake walked in. I sat back down, head lowered. I'd never seen Jake before, but I knew it was him. Even though I could barely look, I could swear that he crossed the room. Everyone in the deli stopped and stared at him. He was tall, sauntered through the restaurant like Gary Cooper in High Noon. He stuck out like a smoking gun, and I could feel everyone's jaw-slackened expression as he approached my table. My death would not go unnoticed. Waiters would tell the police. My personal Grim Reaper noticed me. He marched toward my table, his presence proclaiming me guilty forever. He was very old, 30 at least, but a sharp-looking man, muscled, severe, penetrating eyes, visible through predictable Gestapo-like glasses. He looked every bit the role of the criminal sadist the book described. Dressed in black leather, he was gross, disgusting, sexy. Dr. Rubin would have approved. The dark creases in his face made him all the more fearsome and attractive. He had a crew cut. He appeared to be a total square, definitely a Christian pervert. According to the movies I saw, all the perverts were Christian. It was exactly what I'd asked for. The job would be done, and all would go according to plan. I calmly resigned myself to my grim future. Time to meet your fate, Jamie. This is the man who will kill you this evening. Yet, inexplicably, I had this, again, extremely hard thing between my legs, forcing me to cross my legs. Jake sat down silently at the table. He looked right into my eyes, and I gazed down into an imaginary hole in the middle of the table, the one that led straight to hell. Jake fished out a packet of cigarettes from his pocket. He lit up, blew smoke in my face, and I suppressed a cough. Cigarette? I could swear I specified non-smokers. The stink from the cigarettes was the last straw. How many bad decisions could I make in a single evening? My tongue, nose, eyes, and brain were assaulted by everything. I couldn't even look at Jake or his clothes. Not the leather jacket covered with metal studs, nor the tight shirt hugging his criminal muscles. Bizarre sexual murder fantasies continued to race through my mind. He would strip off my clothes and hang me with my own Levi's. He would tie me to a bed, take out a knife, and draw fanciful designs all over my body until I bled to death. He would sit on my face and bounce up and down until I died of something. You know, you did not make it easy for me to find you. His voice was at once comical and horrifying. From his grim macho man issued the highest, most effeminate voice I'd ever heard. I had to stifle the urge to laugh. I knew all homosexuals spoke like this, so maybe I'm not one after all. What was I thinking? Harold didn't talk like that ever. Maybe I should get out of here. Maybe this was a huge mistake. Boy, do you hear? He did not make it easy to find you. You're not wearing the hat we agreed on. I'm sorry, I forgot. I was nervous, I said, trying not to laugh. You know how you were to address me when you first saw me. You read my letter. He looked angry, his tone effeminate but mean. I was cornered, sat like a savage. But here? I asked helplessly. He didn't say anything. I swallowed. Sir Jake, he smiled approvingly. Relieved, I couldn't help flashing a small, relaxed smile of my own. Well, now that we have that out of the way, I'll tell you a little secret. He hunched over the table until his smoky breath poured right into my face. If you don't freak out about who it is, just say sir in a normal voice, and nobody will suspect a thing. They'll think you're just being polite. He seemed nice. This must be how they lure you, I reasoned. Well, I'm sorry, Sir Gary. I didn't hear you, boy. What did you say? Sir Gary, I repeated, opening volume. What's my name? Sir Drake, sir? Then stop calling me Gary. You think I'm Gary Cooper or something? I swallowed. I was calling you Gary? Sorry, sir. A flash of heat. His eyes took straight aim at me. I was in serious trouble. Maybe dying wasn't all that it was cracked up to be. And of course, that his hope for someone to kill him actually goes kind of awry, and he actually ends up running away, and through a miracle of accidents, he ends up taking home a male prostitute who runs into his car. You'll have to read the book to find out how that fun happens. And he just wants to get rid of the guy. He doesn't know how he got in his car, and he wants rid of him. So the next day, he's just mollifying him, whatever he wants. The guy wants beer from him, so he gives him money to buy beer, because of course he's too young to buy beer. And finally, the guy says, "Okay, I'll leave you alone if you just give me a ride home." Great. So he decides to do that. We arrive at Gary's dilapidated home on the south side, a bad neighborhood, even by Detroit standards.